They told me I didn't belong here. But today, I came to prove them all wrong. Maya tightened her grip on the thick envelope in her hands as she stepped out of the taxi in front of Meridian Financial's towering glass building. The summer sun bounced off the sleek facade, blinding her for a moment, but she didn't flinch. She lifted her chin, her heart pounding with a stubborn rhythm. This wasn't just another errand. This was her first deposit, her first taste of independence, her first step toward becoming the person her father always believed she could be. Inside, the marble floors gleamed under the grand chandeliers. Men in sharp suits and women in elegant dresses moved like a well-rehearsed dance, each carrying their own quiet urgency. Maya took it all in, her wide eyes filled with wonder and determination. 13 years old, wearing a simple green hoodie and jeans, hair braided neatly into 2 small plaits. No luxury purse, no sparkling jewelry. Just a young girl holding $5,000 saved from scholarships and birthday gifts, her pride, her proof. As she joined the line, she glanced at her reflection in the polished walls. A faint smile crept across her lips. One day, she thought, I'll look back at this moment as the beginning of everything. She watched an older white businessman stride past the line, escorted instantly into a private room. She saw an Asian couple pointed coldly to the waiting area. A Latino man in a work uniform grilled with endless questions. Her grip on the envelope tightened. Her mind replayed her father's words. Independence is not just about money. It's about standing up when no one expects you to. Step by step, the line moved, closer. Her chest rose and fell in slow, deep breaths. The envelope felt heavier now, not because of the money inside, but because of what it represented: her worth, her future, her voice. Finally, only one person stood ahead of her. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, her heartbeat echoing louder than the murmurs around her. She looked up at the teller. One more breath. Then it was her turn. And as she stepped forward, she didn't know yet, this wasn't just a deposit. This was the day she would change the entire system forever. They told her she was too young to understand money. They told her she should just enjoy her childhood, play with her friends, spend her afternoons watching cartoons or scrolling on her phone. But Maya Freeman had never been like other 13-year-olds. This morning, as the sun crept through her window, she woke before her alarm. Her room was simple, but filled with small trophies and certificates pinned to a corkboard above her desk. Her eyes scanned each of them. Math competitions, science fairs, scholarship awards, proof that she could stand on her own. She sat at her desk, carefully opening the envelope one last time. $5,000. The first real sum of money she had earned and saved herself, from winning math scholarships and birthday gifts from her parents and relatives. She ran her fingers across the bills, feeling the texture, hearing the soft rustle. It was more than money. It was freedom. It was the beginning of her dream to one day invest in her own startup, travel to faraway science camps, or maybe even fund an idea that could change lives. Her father's words echoed in her mind. Independence is the foundation of everything. Money is not just paper. It's power, choice, and responsibility. She folded the envelope and tucked it into her small crossbody bag. Then she tied her sneakers, pulled her green hoodie over her head, and took a deep breath. Downstairs, the smell of fresh coffee drifted from the kitchen. Her father, Frederick Freeman, sat at the table reading reports on his tablet. His presence filled the room, calm, confident, someone who had learned to navigate storms without losing himself. Maya paused at the bottom of the stairs. He looked up and met her eyes. Ready for your big day, she nodded, her hands gripping the strap of her bag tighter. Remember, he said, the world will not always be fair. You must be stronger than its judgments. She walked over, leaned in, and hugged him. His warmth steadied her nerves. I want to do this myself, she whispered. And that's exactly why I'm proud of you, he replied softly. Outside, the city buzzed with life. Cars honked, people hurried across sidewalks, taxis weaved through lanes like yellow fish in a river. Maya stepped into a taxi, told the driver the bank's address, and leaned back into the seat. Her heart thumped hard against her chest. A mix of excitement and nervous energy coursed through her veins. As the taxi turned onto Fifth Avenue, She watched skyscrapers gleam under the morning sun, their glass facades reflecting the endless possibilities she dreamed about at night. She imagined standing on stage, pitching her first company to investors. She saw herself boarding a plane alone, traveling to a science camp in another country. Each image fueled her determination. When the taxi pulled up in front of Meridian Financial, she took another breath, her eyes locking onto the massive glass doors. She stepped out, paid the driver, and stood still for a moment on the sidewalk. In that instant, everything felt possible. The building loomed above her like a giant mirror, reflecting the blue sky and the promise of a future she was determined to claim. She crossed the marble lobby, her sneakers squeaking slightly against the polished floor. Her fingers curled around the envelope inside her bag. As she stood in line, her mind replayed every lesson her father had taught her. Independence, responsibility, courage. The line moved slowly. She shifted from foot to foot, watching people come and go. In her mind, she imagined how easy it would be. Step up, smile, hand the envelope over, watch the teller deposit her money. Walk out with pride swelling in her chest. She looked up at the tall ceiling, where a chandelier glittered like a constellation. A small smile touched her lips. This was the beginning, the first step toward everything she had ever wanted. She didn't know that by the time she left those doors again, the entire city would know her name. And she didn't know that today. She wasn't just making a deposit. She was about to make history. Maya stood in line, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, her fingers tapping lightly on the envelope inside her bag. The marble lobby of Meridian Financial felt like a cathedral of glass and echoes. Conversations bounced softly off the walls, the faint hum of printers mixed with the distant footsteps of hurried bankers. She glanced around, taking in every detail with curious eyes. A tall white man in a navy suit, carrying a sleek leather briefcase, walked in through the revolving door. Before he even reached the line, a young employee in a crisp gray suit rushed forward to greet him. "Good morning, sir. Please follow me to our VIP room." The man nodded slightly, barely acknowledging the others waiting, and disappeared behind a frosted glass door. Maya's eyes followed him, her eyebrows knitting together. She turned her gaze to an elderly Asian couple standing a few spots ahead of her. The woman clutched a small purse, the man holding a folder close to his chest. They looked around, hesitant, as if they didn't quite belong. When they finally reached the counter, the teller didn't smile or greet them. Instead, she merely pointed to a side seating area, her face expressionless. They exchanged a quiet, confused glance and stepped aside, settling into the chairs without a word. Maya's heart tightened. She shifted her gaze again. A Latino man in a work uniform approached the next counter, holding a worn check in his hand. The teller scanned him quickly, then asked in a sharp tone, "Do you have a government ID, social security card, proof of employment?" The man stammered, pulling papers from his pocket, but the teller kept pressing him with rapid-fire questions. His shoulders sank lower with each demand, his eyes darting anxiously around the lobby. Maya felt her stomach twist. The people in line behind her began to murmur, some shaking their heads, others pretending not to notice. She looked down at her hoodie, the worn laces of her sneakers. Nothing about her screamed money or status. She took a deep breath, pressing her fingers harder against the envelope. Her father's words echoed again. "You are more than what they see." As she inched forward, she couldn't help but imagine the scene playing out for her. Would they treat her like the businessman, or like the couple, or worse, like the man with the check? The line crawled. Every step felt heavier, every breath tighter. She watched an older white woman step up to another teller, greeted with a bright smile and polite words. She watched a young black mother with a toddler wait quietly, her eyes fixed on the floor as she bounced the child on her hip. Maya's eyes followed each of them, her mind recording every interaction like snapshots in a silent documentary. A bead of sweat formed on her neck, sliding slowly down her back. Why do they decide who deserves kindness? She looked up again at the glass ceiling, the chandelier sparkling like a cruel joke above them all. Her turn was getting closer. She could feel her heartbeat pounding in her ears, a steady drum of fear and determination. Would they question her? Would they believe her? She swallowed hard, her lips pressing into a thin line. She remembered her father's hand on her shoulder that morning, his voice low and firm. "No one decides your worth but you." The line moved again, only 2 people ahead of her now. Her fingers shook slightly, but she didn't loosen her grip. She looked at the people around her, their tired eyes, their quiet defeat, their silent pleas for dignity. She straightened her back. If they questioned her, she would answer. If they doubted her, she would prove them wrong one more step. She was next. She took a final breath, her mind sharp and clear. She didn't know what they would say. But she knew exactly who she was. Maya stepped forward. The teller glanced up, her eyes sliding from Maya's face to the envelope in her hand. A moment of silence stretched out, heavy and suffocating. "I'd like to deposit this into my savings account," Maya said, her voice steady but quiet. The teller, a young woman with pale skin and tightly pulled back hair, didn't smile. Her name tag read Bate. Bate's eyes narrowed slightly. She tilted her head, her lips pressing into a thin, doubtful line. "Where did this money come from?" she asked sharply. Maya blinked, her heart stumbling in her chest. "It's from my math scholarships and birthday gifts," she replied, trying to keep her tone calm and open. Bate didn't respond immediately. Instead, she glanced sideways at the next counter. "Mark, can you come here?" Mark, a tall man in his 30s with slicked-back brown hair and a crisp dark tie, looked up. His blue eyes flickered over Maya with a quick, dismissive sweep. He pushed away from his desk and strolled over, his hands sliding into his pockets as if he had all the time in the world. Mark stopped beside Bate, glancing at the envelope on the counter. Then he looked at Maya from head to toe, his gaze dripping with silent judgment. "Young lady," he said slowly, drawing out each word like a blade, "this is quite a large amount for someone your age." Maya swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. "I told you, it's from scholarships and birthday gifts," she repeated, her fingers tightening around the edge of the counter. Mark let out a low chuckle, exchanging a knowing look with Bate. "Scholarships, huh?" he murmured, his voice thick with sarcasm. He leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound secretive but still loud enough for Maya to hear. "Maybe someone gave it to her to hide. Or maybe she's being used." Maya felt heat rush to her face, her pulse pounding so hard it echoed in her ears. She drew in a shaky breath. "This is my money. I have an account here," she said again, each word cutting through the thick air between them. Bate shifted uncomfortably, but Mark only smirked, his eyes flicking over Maya's simple hoodie and jeans like they were a joke. Mark turned to Bate, his voice louder this time. "We need to verify this. It could be suspicious." The word hung there, heavy and ugly. Customers nearby began to glance over, their eyes darting between the small girl and the 2 tellers. A low murmur started to spread, like the first tremor before an earthquake. Bate tapped on her keyboard, her fingers stiff and deliberate. "Do you have any documentation proving where this money came from?" Maya's jaw tightened. No one else had to show documents. She had watched them walk up, smile, and leave. She leaned forward slightly. "I've already explained. It's my money. It's for my account." Bate avoided her gaze, her fingers still moving, eyes flicking nervously at Mark. Mark sighed dramatically, shaking his head. "Maybe we should call the manager," he said, his voice laced with mock pity. Maya felt her entire body buzz with a strange mix of fear and fury. Around her, the whispers grew louder. A man in line shifted uncomfortably. A woman clutched her purse tighter. Bate stood up, signaling to someone across the room. Jessica Keller, the branch manager, approached with slow, confident steps. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her tailored blazer sharp and pristine. She looked down at Maya, her eyes cold and assessing. "What seems to be the problem here?" Mark gestured casually at Maya. "This young lady wants to deposit a suspiciously large amount. She has no proper documentation." Jessica tilted her head slightly, her lips curling into a small, dismissive smile. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with false gentleness, "maybe you should take this money somewhere else, somewhere more appropriate." Maya's eyes widened. "Somewhere else." Jessica leaned closer, her breath icy. "Somewhere people like you usually go." The word slammed into Maya like a physical blow. Her breath caught in her throat, her fingers trembling. "People like you." Maya felt a deep, sharp sting in her chest, a wound opening that she had never felt before. She looked into Jessica's eyes, her own gaze sharpening, hardening. "I'm not leaving," Maya said, her voice shaking but firm. Jessica straightened, her smile fading into a thin, cold line. "If you continue this attitude, we will have to call security." Maya didn't move. She reached into her pocket, her fingers curling around her phone. Her breath came in slow, controlled waves. She lifted her chin, then called them. "Because I'm calling my father." Silence dropped over the lobby like a heavy curtain. Maya pressed the call button, holding the phone to her ear, her eyes never leaving Jessica's face. On the third ring, a deep, steady voice answered. "Maya, what's wrong?" The world seemed to stop breathing. Maya's lips parted, and in that moment, she knew she wasn't just fighting for her deposit. She was about to tear down the walls they had built around her. Maya gripped the phone tighter, her fingers digging into the smooth edges. "Dad. They won't let me deposit my money. They're calling it suspicious." On the other end, Frederick Freeman's voice turned cold, each word cutting like glass. "Put me on with whoever is in charge." Now, Jessica's face paled. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Around them, the entire lobby seemed to freeze. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. A woman holding her baby stared wide-eyed. A man holding a briefcase leaned forward, his eyes locked on Maya. Maya held the phone out, her hand steady despite the storm inside her chest. Jessica hesitated, her perfectly polished nails twitching at her sides. "Take it," Maya said, her voice low but unyielding. Slowly, Jessica reached for the phone, her eyes flicking nervously to Mark and Bate, who both looked as if they might collapse at any second. "Hello, this is Jessica Keller, branch manager." Frederick's voice roared through the speaker, so loud some nearby customers flinched. "How dare you treat my daughter like this? How dare you question her legitimacy in my own bank?" Jessica swallowed hard, her face turning a shade of white that seemed impossible. "Sir, I didn't know," Frederick snapped, his voice razor-sharp. "You didn't know she was my daughter, so you thought it was fine to humiliate a child, a customer." Jessica's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Mark shifted uncomfortably beside her, his eyes darting between the floor and the exit as if searching for a way to vanish. Bate's hands trembled, her eyes filled with regret that came far too late. Frederick's voice dropped lower, each word deliberate and heavy. "We are on our way there now. I want every employee involved in this to stay exactly where they are." Jessica nodded shakily, though Frederick couldn't see her. "Why, yes, sir." Maya stood silently, her eyes locked on Jessica's face. Around her, the tension crackled like a live wire, the silence so deep it felt like the whole building was holding its breath. Finally, Jessica handed the phone back to Maya, her hand visibly shaking. Maya put it back to her ear. "Dad, we're coming, Maya. You did the right thing. I'm proud of you." A wave of warmth spread through Maya's chest, a fragile calm in the middle of the chaos. She lowered the phone, her arm dropping slowly to her side. Jessica stepped back, her composure shattered. Mark took a step away, as if trying to separate himself from the disaster. Bate lowered her head, tears brimming in her eyes. Maya turned slightly, scanning the room. Every single eye was on her now. Some looked horrified, some looked ashamed. A few, she realized, looked inspired. She took a deep breath, her shoulders lifting and falling slowly. She had never wanted attention. She had never wanted to stand in front of a crowd. But at that moment, she felt stronger than she ever had before. Minutes ticked by in excruciating silence. Then the doors swung open. Frederick Freeman stepped in, flanked by two senior board members and Diane Porter, the bank's chief operating officer. His eyes found Maya instantly, and the anger there burned hotter than any fire. Jessica stumbled forward, her voice weak. "Mr. Freeman," silence. Frederick raised a hand, and the word cut the air like a blade. He moved toward Maya, each step echoing across the marble floor. When he reached her, he knelt slightly, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" Maya nodded, her lips trembling but her eyes unwavering. Frederick stood, his gaze shifting to Jessica, then to Mark, then Bate. His voice was low, but it carried through the entire lobby. "You have all failed not just as employees, but as human beings." Jessica's face crumpled, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Frederick's eyes stayed cold. "We'll deal with this right here, right now. The entire lobby seemed to shudder, as if the walls themselves were listening. Maya stood beside her father, her heart pounding with a fierce, unfamiliar pride. Today, she realized, she wasn't just defending her own money. She was standing up for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. Frederick stood tall in the center of the lobby, his presence like a sudden storm breaking over calm water. His eyes swept across every face, Jessica's trembling lips, Mark's darting glances, Bates' downcast stare. The entire lobby was frozen, each breath shallow and waiting. Diane Porter stepped forward beside him, her sharp eyes scanning the room, her tablet in hand, already recording every detail. Frederick turned his gaze to Jessica first. His voice, low and measured, rolled through the air like distant thunder. "You've led this branch for 15 years. You pride yourself on numbers, on polished reports, on controlling every small detail. But tell me, Jessica, what is a bank without trust, without fairness?" Jessica opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks as she struggled to breathe. Frederick shifted his eyes to Mark. "And you think a smile and a crisp tie make you superior? You think you can decide who deserves respect?" Mark's shoulders hunched, his mouth twitching, as if trying to form an apology he no longer believed in. Frederick moved to Bate next. "Bate. You stayed silent. You watched it happen. You let it happen." Bates' tears spilled freely now, her hands shaking as she clutched the edge of the counter. Frederick turned away, his face hardening even more. "I built this bank to be a pillar of integrity. A place where anyone, no matter how they look, no matter where they come from, could walk in and be treated with dignity." He paused, scanning the stunned faces around him. "Today you all failed. Not just as employees, you failed as people." Jessica staggered forward, her voice a broken whisper. "Please, I can fix this." Frederick raised a hand, and the single motion silenced her completely. "You're fired." The words hit her like a blow, and she dropped to her knees, sobbing openly now. Mark's lips parted in shock, but before he could speak, Frederick's voice cut in again. "You too, Mark, fired." Effective immediately, Mark's face drained of all color. He looked around as if someone might save him, but no one moved. Frederick turned to Richard, who had been hiding near the back, eyes wide in terror. "Richard Clark. Fired." Richard staggered backward, nearly tripping over a chair as security guards stepped forward, their hands resting firmly on his shoulders. Bates stood alone, trembling, her eyes locked on Frederick's shoes. Frederick stared at her for a long moment. "Bate, you will be placed on probation. You have one chance to prove you can stand for what's right. One." Bates' knees buckled slightly, but she nodded, gasping out a choked "thank you." Frederick turned back to the gathered crowd of employees and customers. "From today forward, this bank will never again allow discrimination to poison its halls." Diane stepped forward, her voice sharp and unwavering. "Every transaction will be recorded. Every complaint will go directly to the executive board. We will rebuild this place from the inside out." A murmur rippled through the lobby, part relief, part disbelief, all electric. Frederick glanced down at Maya, who stood quietly at his side, her chin high and eyes shining with defiance and pride. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice softening for just a moment. "You started this. You reminded me what this place is supposed to stand for." Maya looked up, her eyes steady, a small, determined smile crossing her face. Frederick turned to Diane. "Begin immediate restructuring, transparency training, bias workshops. Every single employee will undergo evaluation." Diane nodded sharply, already swiping across her tablet, sending rapid orders through the system. Security moved forward, guiding Jessica, Mark, and Richard toward the exit. Each step echoed like a final judgment. The lobby remained silent, everyone frozen, watching the three of them disappear beyond the glass doors. Frederick turned back to the room, his voice rising for the final blow. "If anyone here believes they cannot treat every customer with respect and fairness, you are free to leave now." No one moved. No one dared. Maya looked around, her chest rising with a long, slow breath. In that silence, something shifted. The walls that had once felt cold and distant now seemed to listen, to bend, to change. A new chapter had begun, and Maya, standing at its heart, knew they were only just getting started. Outside, the news vans had already started arriving. Bright lights flared against the glass facade of Meridian Financial as reporters pushed microphones toward the entrance, shouting questions no one was ready to answer. Inside, the echo of security guards escorting Jessica, Mark, and Richard out still lingered like a ghost in the air. Jessica's eyes were red and swollen, her mascara smudged into dark streaks. She stumbled forward, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. Mark's face was pale, sweat glistening at his hairline, his jaw clenched tight. Richard looked lost, like a man who had just stepped off the edge of a cliff and realized too late there was no ground beneath him. As they stepped out into the harsh morning light, a collective gasp rose from the crowd outside. Cameras flashed. Questions rained down like a sudden storm. Is it true you discriminated against a child? Why was she denied service? Did you know she was the chairman's daughter? Jessica tried to shield her face, but it was too late. The world saw everything. Inside, Maya stood next to her father, the tension draining from her shoulders, replaced by a quiet, heavy exhaustion. Frederick watched the doors close behind the fired employees, his eyes sharp but tired. He turned to Diane, who was still busy firing off orders and coordinating statements with the legal team. We need immediate press control. This can't become just a scandal. It has to become a promise, Frederick said, his voice low but firm. Diane nodded, her fingers moving in a blur across her tablet. Already working on it. We'll hold a press conference in 2 hours. We'll release a statement outlining all new policies. Frederick nodded once, then looked down at Maya. Are you okay? She paused, searching for the words. I think I'm more okay than I've ever been. Frederick's face softened, his hand reaching out to gently squeeze her shoulder. You were braver than most adults today. Maya looked up at him, her lips parting slightly as if she wanted to say more. But before she could, Diane stepped forward, her expression urgent. Sir, the media has the story already. It's everywhere. Social media. National news. Frederick took a slow breath, his chest rising and falling as if he were gathering every ounce of resolve he had left. Good. Then we won't hide. We face it head on. In the lobby, employees whispered among themselves, their faces a mix of shock and newfound clarity. A few looked at Maya with cautious gratitude, as if they realized she had shattered a curse they didn't even know they were under. Bates stood alone at her counter, staring at her trembling hands. She looked up slowly, her eyes meeting Maya's across the room. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Bate opened her mouth, her voice rough and cracked. Thank you. Maya held her gaze, then nodded once, a small, steady acknowledgement that said everything words could not. Outside, the noise only grew louder. Helicopters hovered above. Commentators on TV screens dissected every frame of the footage. Maya watched it all through the glass doors, feeling a strange sense of both vulnerability and power. She had come to deposit money. That was all. Now the world was asking her to lead. Frederick turned back to Diane. Prepare the boardroom. We meet the media in 2 hours. I want Maya beside me. Maya turned to look at him, her eyes wide. Me, Frederick nodded firmly. You started this. You deserve to stand there. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Then Maya nodded, her hands curling into small fists at her sides. Okay. Outside, the cameras continued to flash. Inside, a girl stood taller than she ever had before. The story was no longer just hers. It belonged to everyone who had ever been told they were less. And today, that story was only beginning. 2 hours later, the boardroom on the top floor of Meridian Financial looked nothing like a place meant for spreadsheets and quarterly reports. Bright lights flooded the space, casting sharp reflections off the glass walls. A sea of cameras pointed toward the podium at the front, each lens waiting, hungry for a new headline. Executives stood in tense rows along the sides, their suits immaculate but their faces pale, hands nervously clutching notepads they knew they wouldn't need. Frederick Freeman stepped forward first. His steps were calm, deliberate, as though each movement weighed 1,000 pounds. Beside him, Maya walked with slow breaths, her eyes wide but unwavering. She wore the same green hoodie, the same jeans. There was no attempt to disguise who she was. The moment they appeared, the room erupted. Mr. Freeman. Is it true your daughter was denied service because of her race? How did this happen in your own bank? Will there be lawsuits? Frederick raised a hand. The room fell silent, the sound collapsing into a vacuum. Today, we are not here to make excuses, he began, his voice low but steady, echoing through the hush. We are here to own our failure. And to promise that this bank, from this moment forward, will never be the same. He paused, glancing at Maya, whose small frame seemed to carry a storm inside it. My daughter, Maya, came here today to do something simple, to deposit money she had earned through her own brilliance and hard work. He looked back at the cameras, his eyes sharp as blades. But instead, she was met with suspicion, judgment, and humiliation by my own employees in my own institution. A collective shiver ran through the room. Reporters shifted, pens frozen above notepads. Frederick took a breath, his shoulders squaring even further. This was not an isolated mistake. It was a mirror held up to an industry-wide sickness. He paused, letting the words sink in like heavy rain on dry earth. We have already begun firing those directly responsible. But that is not enough. From today, we are implementing a new system. Every transaction will be monitored for bias. Every employee will undergo mandatory anti-discrimination training. A new oversight council, including customers, will hold us accountable. A murmur rose, reporters scribbling frantically, cameras clicking faster. Frederick turned, his hand gently resting on Maya's shoulder. She looked up at him, then stepped forward. Her voice came out soft, almost fragile at first. When I came here today, I just wanted to do what my dad taught me, take care of my own money, learn to be responsible. She paused, swallowing hard as her fingers curled into fists. But they looked at me and didn't see a student or a daughter or a young girl with dreams. They saw someone they decided didn't belong. A hush fell so deep it felt like the whole world had stopped to listen. Maya took another breath, her voice rising stronger. I don't want to be just the girl this happened to. I want to be the reason it never happens to anyone else again. In the back, a few employees lowered their heads, tears shining in their eyes. Frederick stepped closer, nodding to her words. We are not just changing a policy. We are starting a movement. And if anyone in this industry believes this is just a PR move, they are free to leave now. A single, sharp clap echoed through the room, then another. And another. Soon, the boardroom erupted into a standing ovation. Reporters stood, clapping, some with tears streaming down their faces. Maya's eyes glistened, but she did not look away. Frederick turned to the crowd once more. We have shaken this bank. Now, we intend to shake the entire financial system. Cameras flashed like lightning, capturing the exact moment a father and daughter stood together, not just as family, but as a force of change. Outside, the headlines were already forming, words racing faster than any closing bell on Wall Street. But inside that room, no one was thinking about stock prices or quarterly growth. They were thinking about fairness, about dignity, about a future they had almost forgotten to believe in. And at the center of it all, Maya stood tall, no longer just her father's daughter. She was a spark that had just ignited a revolution. A week later, the summer air felt different. Maya stood in front of Meridian Financial's main branch again, her hands buried in the pockets of an old gray hoodie. A faded baseball cap covered most of her braids, her sneakers scuffed from the city sidewalks. Today, there were no cameras, no boardroom lights, no father at her side, just her. She stared up at the towering glass facade, the same one that had once felt like an unscalable wall. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. The lobby looked exactly the same. Polished marble floors, high glass ceilings, a chandelier sparkling like a constellation. But something in the air felt different, as if the walls themselves had learned to listen. Maya scanned the counters, her eyes landing on Bate. Bate stood straighter than before, her eyes clear, her hands steady. A young black man in a work uniform stepped up to her counter. Bate greeted him with a warm smile. "Good morning, sir." "How can I assist you today?" Maya watched, her breath catching. The man smiled back, his shoulders relaxing immediately. Near another counter, a young Asian woman opened an account. The teller, a new employee Maya hadn't seen before, leaned in attentively, explaining each form without a single hint of impatience or condescension. A Latino father with his small daughter stood in line. When they reached the counter, the teller offered the girl a small sticker, her eyes lighting up as she giggled. Maya felt her throat tighten. She stepped up next, her old sneakers squeaking slightly on the marble. Bate looked up, recognition flashing in her eyes. For a moment, time paused. Then Bate's lips curved into a gentle, genuine smile. "Good morning. What can I do for you today?" Maya placed a check on the counter. $10,000. Bate glanced at it, then back at Maya, her expression never wavering. "Would you like to deposit the full amount into your savings account today?" Maya nodded, her heartbeat steady, her hands finally still. Bate processed the transaction quickly, her movements confident and smooth. There were no questions about documentation, no suspicious glances, no hushed whispers to the next counter. Just a simple transaction, exactly what it should have been all along. When Bate handed back the receipt, she met Maya's eyes. "Thank you for trusting us." Maya took the paper, holding it gently as if it were something fragile and precious. "Thank you for changing." Bate's eyes glimmered for a moment, then she nodded. Maya turned and stepped away from the counter, her shoulders light, her steps calm and even. She passed the other customers, seeing them not as strangers but as quiet victories, each one a testament to a new way forward. Outside, the sky stretched wide and blue, sunlight catching on the glass towers around her. She took a long, deep breath, feeling the city's pulse beneath her feet. For the first time, she realized she had not just changed a policy, she had helped change a culture. A small smile spread across her face as she started down the sidewalk. Today, no one knew her name. No cameras followed her steps. But she carried something more powerful than fame. Proof. Proof that change was real. Proof that she had not stood up in vain. And as she disappeared into the crowd, her heart felt light, her spirit steady. The world had shifted. And she was ready to keep walking forward, one brave step at a time. Maya sat at her bedroom desk, the city lights twinkling outside her window like scattered stars. Her fingers hovered over her laptop keyboard, her mind replaying every step she had taken since that day at the bank. Her email inbox was overflowing. Messages from journalists, activists, students, parents, strangers from all over the country thanking her, sharing their own stories, asking her what to do next. She scrolled through them slowly, each line a quiet confession of pain and hope. "I was denied a loan because of my accent. They questioned my mother when she tried to open an account. I didn't think anyone would ever stand up for people like us." Maya closed her eyes for a moment, her breath shaky but deep. A notification popped up on her screen. Invitation to speak at the National Youth Social Justice Summit. Her eyes widened. Her fingers trembled slightly as she clicked it open. "We would be honored if you shared your story and inspired the next generation to believe they have power." She read the words twice, then a third time. A knock sounded softly at her door. Frederick peeked in, his eyes gentle, a small, tired smile on his face. "Can I come in?" she nodded, motioning him closer. He sat on the edge of her bed, looking around at the photos on her walls, snapshots of science fairs, certificates, sticky notes with equations and quotes. "You've been quiet tonight," he said. Maya turned the laptop screen toward him. He leaned in, reading carefully. He sat back, eyes glimmering. "That's a big step, Maya." She looked at him, her brows furrowed. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I fail them?" Frederick shook his head slowly. "You didn't start this because you wanted to be perfect. You started it because you knew it was right. That's what they'll hear. That's what matters." Maya swallowed, her throat tight. After a moment, she nodded. "I want to do it." Frederick's face broke into a proud, quiet smile. "Then do it. And I'll be there in the front row." The next week, Maya stood backstage at the massive auditorium in Washington, D.C. Through a crack in the curtain, she could see hundreds of young faces, eyes bright and restless, notebooks ready. She pressed a hand against her chest, feeling her heartbeat galloping beneath her skin. A voice announced her name, echoing through the hall. The curtains parted. The lights washed over her. She stepped forward, each footfall echoing loud in her mind. "When I was 13, I walked into a bank just to deposit my own money." A hush settled across the room. They didn't see a student or a child. They saw a threat. She paused, letting the silence speak. "But I stood up. And I realized one voice can open a door." 1,000 voices can tear down the walls. A ripple ran through the audience, some leaning forward, others scribbling furiously. I'm not special because my dad runs a bank. I'm not special because I went viral. I'm here because I refuse to be silent. And so can you. A sudden wave of applause rose, unstoppable, filling every corner of the hall. Maya stood still, breathing it in, her hands relaxed at her sides. Somewhere in the front row, Frederick rose to his feet, clapping, his eyes shining with tears. From that day forward, Maya wasn't just a story on the news. She became a symbol, a living reminder that change can start with a single question, a single refusal, a single brave step. Other banks began reviewing their policies. Universities invited her to speak. Nonprofits reached out to build new alliances. She traveled from city to city, school to school, standing in front of young people who finally felt seen. And each time she ended her speech the same way. We changed one bank. Now, let's change everything. The world began to echo back her words. A movement had begun. And Maya, no longer just a girl with an envelope of cash, was ready to carry it forward. One voice, one heart, one brave act at a time. The morning sun broke over the city's skyline like a quiet promise. At Meridian Financial headquarters, the lobby buzzed with an energy that felt new, not forced or polished, but real. Employees moved quickly, their voices low but warm, their eyes brighter than they had ever been. On the top floor, a massive auditorium had been transformed. A bold banner hung across the back wall in giant letters. All customers deserve to be treated with respect and served fairly. Rows of chairs filled with reporters, customers, activists, students. Cameras stood ready, their red lights blinking, waiting to capture every word. Frederick stood at the side of the stage, adjusting his tie with steady hands. He turned, his eyes finding Maya as she stepped forward, wearing a simple white blouse and black pants. No fancy jewelry, no designer bag, just Maya. He reached out, squeezing her hand once. "Are you ready?" She nodded, her eyes sharp and steady. They stepped up together, the room falling into immediate silence. Frederick took the podium first. His voice, low and resolute, carried through the hall. "A year ago, my daughter walked into one of my branches, hoping to deposit her own money. She was denied, judged, humiliated." He paused, his eyes scanning the room, letting the words sink in. "That day, I learned more about courage than I ever had in my entire career." A murmur of agreement rippled through the audience. Frederick continued, his tone growing stronger. "Today, we announce a full rollout of policies to guarantee fairness and dignity to every customer, regardless of their appearance, their background, or their status." He stepped aside, turning to Maya. She took a deep breath and stepped up to the microphone. Her voice came out clear, unwavering. "When I first spoke up, I was terrified. I didn't know if anyone would listen. But today, I know that one voice can lead to 1,000, and 1,000 can lead to real change." She paused, looking across the sea of faces. "We've changed this bank. We've shown that accountability isn't an option, it's a responsibility." She glanced over at her father, who stood proudly, his hands folded in front of him. "But this is not the end." The audience leaned in, holding their breath. "This is just the beginning. We're not stopping with one bank. We're not stopping with one city. We're going to keep going until fairness isn't a privilege. It's a guarantee." A sudden roar of applause burst through the hall, rolling over the stage like a wave. Maya stood still for a moment, breathing it in, her eyes shimmering but strong. Outside, live streams carried her words to millions. Young people watched from classrooms, parents watched from living rooms, strangers watched from crowded subway stations. Somewhere in the crowd, a young girl held her mother's hand tighter, her eyes wide with quiet hope. Frederick stepped forward again, raising one hand to quiet the applause. "Together," he said, his voice warm and full. Maya looked at him, then back to the audience. "Together," she echoed. The applause erupted again, louder, unstoppable, unstoppable. And as they stood side by side, father and daughter, leader and fighter, they knew this was more than a campaign or a slogan. It was a new dawn. A promise written in every heartbeat, in every whispered thank you, in every determined step forward. Maya looked out at the faces before her, then up toward the lights, her heart steady and full. "We've changed one bank. Now, let's change the world. The room exploded in applause one last time. And in that moment, beneath the bright lights and the swelling noise, Maya realized something she would carry forever. Change doesn't start in boardrooms or on glossy posters. It starts with one brave voice. And today, that voice had become an unbreakable chorus.